On April 12, 2023, at 3:57 in the morning, the world was quiet. But at 21,000 feet above sea level, on the lower section of Mount Everest's Khumbu Icefall, the silence was different. Here, in a constantly shifting labyrinth of ice blocks the size of small buildings, sound was a warning. The man moving through this landscape was Tyler James Brennan, a 23-year-old American university student from Austin, Texas. He was completely alone, moving illegally under the light of a near full moon. The air was cold, about 8 degrees Fahrenheit below zero, with light winds of just 6 miles per hour. The conditions were deceptively perfect, masking the immense, objective danger of the terrain around him. His only companion was a small camera, recording every step into the darkness. Tyler's plan was simple and reckless: ascend through the night to avoid being seen, following the ropes left by professional teams. He had no guide, no permit, and no established time to turn back. His only goal was to push as far as he could before sunrise, capturing footage for his online channel. Everything he did was for the video. Before we uncover the series of choices that brought him to this exact moment, we'd like to hear from you. Please leave a comment letting us know where you're watching from in the world. If stories of survival and critical decisions fascinate you, consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel for more. Now, at 3:57 in the morning, Tyler James Brennan was approaching a critical crossing, unaware that in less than a minute, his entire world would collapse. He had spent 3 months preparing for this moment, watching 47 different YouTube videos of Everest expeditions from his apartment in Texas. He had invested $2,800, money saved from a student loan, on budget gear from online retailers. He told his family he was backpacking in Southeast Asia. For Tyler, this climb was not about the mountain, it was about the story he could tell afterward. He believed that one spectacular act could redefine his entire life. But in the unforgiving reality of the Himalayas, a mountain does not care about your motivations. It only measures your skill and your respect for its power. A single decision, lasting less than 20 seconds, was about to make all of his digital preparation tragically irrelevant. To understand what happened, we must first go back. We need to understand who Tyler James Brennan was. Tyler James Brennan was born on the 19th of June, 1999, in the sprawling desert heat of Phoenix, Arizona. By the age of 23, he was a student in Austin, Texas, pursuing a degree in business administration, a path chosen more for its perceived practicality than for any real passion. He was the son of Mark, a quiet accountant, and Chloe, a yoga instructor, and the younger brother to Jessica, whose academic successes cast a long shadow over his own life. Tyler lived a life familiar to many students: a shared apartment, a part-time job as a barista that brought in about $1,400 a month, and a constant low-level pressure to define himself. To his family, he was a good son, if a little distant. They believed he was spending his spring on a backpacking trip through Southeast Asia, an understandable adventure. They had no idea he was half a world away, chasing a phantom. Beneath the surface of an ordinary college student was a deep chasm between the person Tyler James Brennan was and the person he desperately wanted to project to the world. He was not a man of meticulous detail or patient practice. His preparation for any challenge was often passive, a consumption of information rather than an acquisition of skill. He would watch dozens of videos on how to perform a task, believing that understanding the theory was the same as mastering the execution. This trait extended from his studies to his hobbies, creating a fragile confidence built on a foundation of digital knowledge rather than real-world experience. He craved external validation, a sign from the world that he was more than average, more than predictable. He was convinced that a single grand, undeniable act of courage could instantly transform him, erasing all his perceived inadequacies in one brilliant flash of recorded glory. His history with what could be generously called mountaineering was virtually non-existent. It was a resume consisting of activities that bear no resemblance to the brutal demands of the Himalayas. In 2019, he completed a day hike on the Bright Angel Trail in the Grand Canyon, a popular and well-maintained path. He had also summited Camelback Mountain in his home city of Phoenix, an outing that thousands of tourists complete every year without any technical equipment. His only true climbing experience was inside a bouldering gym in Austin, where he practiced twice a week on artificial walls that never exceeded 16 feet in height. He had never once strapped a pair of crampons to his boots. He had never held an ice axe. He possessed zero training in the essential skills of crevasse rescue, glacier travel, or the slow, painful process of high-altitude acclimatization. Tyler James Brennan's preparation for Mount Everest was conducted entirely through a screen. Over the course of 3 months, he sat in a shared Texas apartment and watched 47 different YouTube videos documenting Everest expeditions. He mistook the fluid movements of seasoned climbers for ease and the curated narratives of online content creators for the complete reality of the mountain. His total financial investment was $2,800, money taken from a student loan meant for his education. This sum covered a budget flight to Nepal and a collection of dangerously inadequate gear purchased from online retailers like Amazon and AliExpress. His jacket was rated for temperatures no colder than 5 degrees Fahrenheit. His boots were stiff trekking models, not insulated for high altitude. He invested nothing in a guide, nothing in supplemental oxygen, and nothing in the $11,000 permit required to legally be on the mountain. The true engine of his fatal ambition was not a love for mountains, but a deep and painful narcissistic wound. Just 2 months before his trip, his girlfriend of 2 years, Sarah, had ended their relationship. During their final conversation, she had used 2 words that became lodged in his mind: predictable and unambitious. The illegal, solo attempt on the world's highest peak was a direct and tragically disproportionate response to that single comment. His plan was to create a video so extreme, so undeniably daring, that it would go viral. He would prove to her and to the world that he was the opposite of predictable. His YouTube channel, with its meager 342 subscribers, was to be the stage for this grand redemption. He wasn't seeking communion with nature. He was seeking to win an argument with a ghost, using an 8,000-meter mountain as his exclamation point. Unlike the seasoned climbers he watched online, Tyler James Brennan had no time-honored rituals, no lucky charms, no worn photograph of a loved one tucked into his jacket. His rituals were born of the modern age. Each morning before leaving the isolation of his hidden tent, his final act was to check Sarah's Instagram profile on his phone. It was a self-inflicted wound, a way to stoke the fires of his resentment and harden his resolve for the day ahead. The most significant personal item he carried was not a memento from home, but a used GoPro Hero 8 camera he had purchased on eBay. This small black box was everything to him. It was not merely a tool for documentation, it was the objective witness that would validate his transformation, the unblinking eye that would capture his triumph and broadcast his new identity to the world. His only connection was through the lens he hoped would make him famous. He had constructed a narrative in his mind, edited and scored like one of the videos he had consumed. In this story, he was the underdog, the determined hero proving everyone wrong. He had purchased the gear, watched the footage, and armed himself with a motivation so powerful it felt like a shield against reality itself. He had done everything right according to the flawed logic of his own script, a script written in a language of likes, shares, and viral potential. He believed he was prepared for the climb, for the cold, and for the camera. But the one thing his digital education could never prepare him for was the mountain itself. Because a mountain does not care about your story. It does not watch your videos. It only measures you against its own unforgiving and absolute truth. The world for Tyler James Brennan began to shrink at 2 hours and 47 minutes in the morning on the 12th of April. Inside his small hidden tent, the darkness was absolute, a physical presence that pressed in from all sides. The cold was a living thing, seeping through his sleeping bag and making his fingers feel like brittle sticks. Every movement, from zipping his inadequate jacket to checking the battery on this camera, required a slow, conscious effort. Outside, the air was a biting 8 degrees Fahrenheit below zero, but the wind was calm, moving at just 6 miles per hour. It was a perfect, silent, and treacherous morning. His final ritual before stepping out onto the ice was not to check a map or a compass. It was to turn on his phone, open Instagram, and look at his ex-girlfriend's profile one last time, stoking the cold fire of resentment that had pushed him halfway across the world. At precisely 3 o'clock in the morning, Tyler James Brennan stepped out of his tent and into the immense moonlit theater of the Himalayas. He moved with a quiet, nervous energy, his footsteps making a sharp crunching sound on the frozen snow that seemed deafening in the silence. His plan was brutally simple. Follow the fixed ropes installed by the professional Sherpa teams, moving quickly through the deadliest part of the climb under the cover of darkness. He was a ghost on the mountain, hoping to slip past the official checkpoints and the watchful eyes of experienced climbers. The beam from his headlamp cut a small, lonely circle in the vast landscape of towering ice blocks. All around him, the glacier glittered under the near-full moon, a scene of impossible beauty that masked a foundation of constant, violent movement. He felt not like an intruder, but like the star of his own epic film. In the first hour, his progress was steady. He navigated the initial, less chaotic sections of the Khumbu Icefall with a growing sense of confidence.
But the mountain was already sending him subtle messages that he was unable to read. His breathing was becoming rapid, far more than 20 breaths per minute, a clear sign his body was struggling with the thin air. He mistook this for the normal exertion of a tough workout. 10 minutes later, he had to stop. The cheap, generic crampon on his right boot had shifted slightly. He knelt in the snow, his gloved fingers fumbling with the nylon strap, annoyed by the delay. A professional would have seen this poor fit as a critical failure, a reason to turn back immediately. To Tyler, it was just a minor inconvenience, another piece of adversity to overcome for his story, another moment of dramatic tension to capture on camera. But there was something else he was carrying, a secret he had kept from everyone, including the logic of the mountain itself. It was a violation of the most fundamental rule of high-altitude climbing. Every seasoned mountaineer understands that above 20,000 feet, where the air has less than half the oxygen of sea level, the human brain is already compromised. Judgment is the first casualty. In this environment, focus is not just a skill, it is the only currency that can purchase survival. Distractions are not a nuisance, they are a direct invitation to disaster. The history of Everest is written in the stories of climbers who lost their concentration for a few fatal seconds. Tyler James Brennan, however, believed he was different. He believed the rules that applied to everyone else did not apply to the protagonist of his own story. As he pushed deeper into the icefall, the glacier began to speak. It was not a language of words, but of sound and vibration. A deep groaning rumble echoed from somewhere below him as a massive piece of ice shifted under its own colossal weight. Minutes later, a sharp crack like a rifle shot split the air to his left. To an experienced climber, these are urgent warnings, a constant reminder that the ground beneath their feet is unstable and actively trying to kill them. They are signals to move faster, to be more vigilant, to waste no time. For Tyler, these sounds were merely the soundtrack to his adventure. He even paused to point his camera into the darkness, hoping to have captured the epic noise. He was a tourist in a war zone, admiring the aesthetics of the explosions without understanding their lethal intent. The altitude was now waging a silent war against his body, and it was winning. At over 21,000 feet, the lack of oxygen begins to subtly disconnect the brain from the limbs. It introduces tiny delays, small errors in coordination that can have massive consequences. The GoPro footage, which he kept running continuously, captured a clear and unambiguous warning. While walking across a relatively flat and stable section of ice, his left foot snagged on nothing, sending him stumbling forward. He caught his balance at the last moment, laughing breathlessly for the camera. "Whoa, a little clumsy there," he whispered, framing the incident as a moment of relatable human error. He did not recognize it for what it was, a neurological red flag, a direct signal from his brain that it was no longer functioning reliably. He was losing control and did not even know it. By 3 hours and 50 minutes in the morning, Tyler James Brennan was standing at the edge of his destiny. He had successfully navigated the lower labyrinth of the icefall, alone and undetected. His fear had been replaced by an intoxicating, unearned confidence. In his mind, the plan was working perfectly. He felt he had proven his ability, that he belonged there. Ahead of him, glinting under the cold moonlight, was the first of the aluminum ladders that spanned the deep crevasses. It stretched across a chasm of pure black emptiness. He looked at this critical crossing, the ultimate test of skill and procedure on the icefall, and saw something entirely different. He did not see a complex technical problem that demanded absolute adherence to safety protocols. He saw the next great scene for his video. He was no longer thinking about survival. He was thinking about the shot. The Khumbu Icefall is not a static feature on a mountain. It is a living, breathing river of ice, 1.2 miles long, that flows downhill at a rate of nearly 3 feet every single day. This constant, immense pressure fractures the glacier into a chaotic maze of seracs, unstable blocks of ice that can weigh over 100 tons, the size of small office buildings, and deep crevasses that can plunge more than 160 feet into the earth. It is objectively one of the most dangerous places on any standard mountaineering route in the world. The landscape here is temporary, a frozen snapshot of a slow-motion collapse. Every surface, every bridge, every towering pillar of ice is on a relentless, unstoppable journey to the bottom, and it does not care who's standing on it when it decides to move. The specific spot where Tyler James Brennan now stood was a perfect illustration of this danger. An aluminum ladder, just 20 feet long, spanned a crevasse that was 26 feet wide, about the length of 2 small cars parked end to end. Below this fragile metal bridge was a chasm of pure, dark blue emptiness, plunging 130 feet deep. But the most immediate threat was not below him, it was above. Looming over this crossing were several precariously balanced seracs, enormous walls of ice held in place by nothing more than frozen physics. They were like silent, frozen guillotines, waiting for the slightest trigger, the warmth of the morning sun, a distant vibration, to come crashing down with unimaginable force. To be in this place is to be a target in a shooting gallery designed by nature. This location has a history, written in tragedy. On the morning of April 18, 2014, a massive serac, not far from this very spot, collapsed without any warning. The resulting avalanche of ice swept through the lower sections of the icefall, and in a matter of seconds, 16 Nepali guides were killed. It was one of the single deadliest days in the history of Mount Everest. The mountain had demonstrated in the most brutal way possible that experience and skill are no defense against the objective power of gravity and shifting ice. The danger here is not a matter of opinion or skill level. It is a statistical certainty. The question is not if the ice will fall, but when and who will be underneath it. Because of this brutal reality, there is an unwritten law in the Khumbu Icefall, an absolute rule that every single person who values their life follows without question. You do not stop, you do not linger, you do not take your time. You cross as quickly and efficiently as possible, ideally before the sun has a chance to warm the ice and increase its instability. The reason for this rule is simple physics. The longer you spend inside this constantly moving labyrinth, the higher the statistical probability that you will be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Survival here is not about courage or strength. It is about minimizing your exposure to a game of cosmic roulette. You are always, without exception, clipped into the safety ropes because in the Khumbu Icefall, luck is not a strategy. At exactly 3 hours and 57 minutes in the morning, under the cold, unblinking light of a near full moon, Tyler James Brennan stood at the precipice. Before him lay the 20-foot aluminum ladder, a thin metal spine bridging a chasm of absolute blackness. He was at 21,000 feet above sea level, surrounded by a silence so profound that the sound of his own harsh breathing seemed to fill the world. The fixed safety rope ran parallel to the ladder, a lifeline installed by professionals who understood the physics of failure. Every instinct of the mountain, every lesson from a century of tragedy, demanded one simple action: clip in. But Tyler was not listening to the mountain. He was listening to the narrator in his own head, a voice that demanded a performance, not prudence. He looked from the safety rope to the small, red recording light on his camera. To him, the act of clipping his carabiner onto the line felt clumsy, slow, the mark of an amateur. He remembered the fluid, almost casual movements of the climbers in the videos he had watched for hours. They made it look so simple. He wanted that same effortless confidence for his own footage. 12 seconds before he moved, the camera recorded his quiet whisper, a chilling piece of self-deception spoken into the frozen air. "This looks kind of sketchy," he murmured, "but the guys in the videos make it look easy." It was a conscious choice, a decision to prioritize the appearance of competence over the reality of survival. He chose the shot over the rope. He chose the story over his life. With his harness unattached to the safety line, he took a final shallow breath and stepped onto the first icy rung of the ladder. His boots, with their ill-fitting crampons, made a hollow metallic sound against the aluminum. 5 seconds. He took another step, his balance steady for a moment, buoyed by his surge of adrenaline and misplaced self-assurance. 10 seconds. He was now in the middle of the span, suspended over 130 feet of empty, dark blue space. He shifted his weight to his right foot, preparing to step onto the third rung. 15 seconds. He was not a climber executing a technical maneuver. He was an actor on a stage of his own making, performing for an audience of one, the unblinking lens that he believed would grant him a new identity. And then, physics delivered its verdict. As his full weight landed on his right foot, the cheap, generic crampon, never properly secured to his trekking boot, finally failed. The nylon strap shifted by just a few millimeters, but it was enough. The crampon's front points, which had been barely gripping the rounded, icy surface of the rung, slipped off. The loss of traction was absolute and instantaneous. His right foot shot forward into empty air, and his center of gravity plunged violently downward. There was no backup system. There was no second chance. The 20-second performance was over, and the unforgiving reality of the mountain was taking control. And then, exactly as you saw in the beginning of this video, his world inverted. His hands, driven by pure instinct, shot out to grab the sides of the ladder, but it was too late. The momentum of his body, amplified by the weight of his pack, was already pulling him over the edge. The GoPro, still securely attached to his helmet, captured a dizzy and chaotic blur of spinning ice and encroaching darkness.
There was no scream, only the sharp, involuntary gasp of a man whose body has just been betrayed by a fatal miscalculation. The silent, beautiful theater of the Himalayas had become a vertical tunnel of jagged blue ice, and he was falling through it. The descent into the crevasse lasted approximately 6 seconds. He fell a vertical distance of 105 feet before the fissure narrowed enough to arrest his fall. The camera recorded at least 2 distinct, brutal impacts against the ice walls. the sickening crunch of gear and bone against a surface as hard as concrete. These collisions slightly slowed his momentum but ensured devastating injuries. He did not hit the bottom. Instead, he came to a sudden, violent stop, wedged tightly between two unmoving walls of ancient ice. He was in a semi-upright position, plunged into a darkness so complete it felt like a physical substance. The fall was over. Miraculously and tragically, he was still conscious. For a few moments, there was only the sound of his own ragged, panicked breathing echoing in the tight space. The only witness to his plight was the small electronic device still recording, its memory card capturing the first moments of a private, lonely hell. No one in the world knew where he was. No rescue was coming. The adrenaline that had fueled his ascent now flooded his system for a different reason, masking the immediate pain of multiple fractures. He cried out for help, his voice swallowed by the immense, indifferent ice that surrounded him. He fumbled for his phone, but inside a crevasse at 21,000 feet, there was no signal. There was no escape. The hope and the adrenaline began to fade. In their place, the cold began its work. The temperature at the bottom of the crevasse was approximately 13 degrees Fahrenheit below zero, and his inadequate jacket offered almost no protection. Hypothermia, the silent killer of the mountains, began to set in with terrifying speed. His body, already starved of oxygen, now began to shut down to conserve heat. The audio recorded his cries for help turning into confused, slurred mumbling, a classic sign of a mind freezing to death. He remained conscious for 2 hours and 17 minutes, a slow, agonizing descent into silence. Finally, only the sound of his shallow, labored breathing remained, each breath farther apart than the last, until it stopped altogether. A short time later, the camera's battery died, and the little red light went out, plunging the scene into the absolute darkness it would hold for the next 11 days. Tyler James Brennan's body was eventually discovered by pure chance on the 23rd of April by a team of Sherpas maintaining the route. The recovery was a complex 8-hour operation. His camera, its memory card intact, had served its purpose. It had not recorded a triumph. It had recorded a detailed, frame-by-frame instructional video on how a single 20-second decision, born from a desire for validation, can cost you everything. Because no one in the world knew Tyler James Brennan was on the mountain, there was no rescue. There was only a recording. For the first 30 minutes after the fall, his GoPro captured the raw, panicked audio of a young man crying out for help into an icy tomb that would never answer. The footage shows him fumbling for his phone, the screen lighting up his terrified face before displaying the 2 words that sealed his fate: no signal. As the adrenaline faded, the crushing cold took its place. The temperature inside the crevasse was approximately 13 degrees Fahrenheit below zero, and his inadequate clothing offered no defense. The camera documented the slow, cruel progression of severe hypothermia. His words became slurred, his movements sluggish, his thoughts confused. He remained conscious for 2 hours and 17 minutes before his labored breathing grew shallow, then stopped completely. A short time later, the camera's battery died, and the darkness became absolute. For 11 days, the Khumbu Icefall held its secret. Then, on the 23rd of April 2023, a team of Sherpas maintaining the route for their clients noticed something unusual. A piece of brightly colored nylon, part of Tyler's backpack, was barely visible deep within a crevasse. The discovery was pure chance. What followed was a complex and dangerous 8-hour recovery operation. The team had to descend into the unstable fissure, carefully chipping away at the ice to free his body, which was wedged tightly 105 feet below the surface. They found him in a semi-upright position, his limbs frozen in place. The cheap crampon was still dangling loosely from his right boot, a silent testament to the moment of failure. His helmet was cracked, but the small black camera attached to it was perfectly preserved, its memory card untouched by the fall or the freezing temperatures. The camera, the one piece of equipment Tyler James Brennan had valued above all others, became his final, tragic legacy. Its memory card was handed over to Nepalese authorities, who reviewed the footage and then passed it on to the Brennan family. The video contained a complete, first-person account of his final hours, a detailed record of the choices that led to his death. His devastated family made the difficult decision to never release the footage to the public.
They issued a single, brief statement, asking for privacy and warning others about the profound dangers of seeking online fame through reckless acts. Tyler James Brennan did not become a viral sensation. He became a statistic. He was the 311th person to die on the slopes of Mount Everest, his entire story contained on a tiny memory card, a private testament to a very public ambition. In the end, Tyler James Brennan did not die simply because Mount Everest is a dangerous place. He died because of a quiet, internal cascade of choices, each one building on the last. It began with the decision to substitute the passive consumption of online videos for the active acquisition of real-world skill, creating a fatal gap between his confidence and his competence. This was followed by the choice to invest in a camera to document his story before investing in the equipment that would have kept him safe, prioritizing the narrative over the narrator. Finally, it came down to a single 20-second decision in the Khumbu icefall to remain unclipped from a safety line, a choice made not for efficiency, but for the sake of a better shot. Each of these steps, viewed in isolation, may have seemed like a small compromise. Together, they formed an inescapable and tragic verdict delivered by the unyielding physics of the mountain. His story is a chilling reflection of a universal human vulnerability, amplified by the pressures of a digital world. It is the quiet voice in our own minds that tells us we are the exception to the rule, the protagonist in a story where things will turn out differently. It is the temptation to value the appearance of competence over the difficult, unglamorous work of achieving it. Tyler James Brennan's final journey is a brutal reminder that some environments do not offer second chances. The mountain does not negotiate. It does not recognize ambition or motivation. It only measures you against its own absolute truth. Tyler James Brennan, 1999 to 2023. His story, recorded with perfect clarity, serves as a permanent warning that should not and will not be forgotten.